$40 doesn't get you much these days. Everything is so darn expensive now. Video games, burgers, tech toys, fidget spinners, this crap is milking me dry. I took a pretty girl out for some bananas and root beer and I could barely afford RGB shoelaces to impress her. And I even had to beg her to pay for my Pokemon cards. So like, what the heck is going on? I want things, but they cost money all the time. It's not fair, damn it! What am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to get a job to just pay for the things I want? Screw that. I'm not getting a job. Jobs are stupid for stupid people. You get a job. I have a better plan. Mom, can I have $40 to buy a retro handheld from China? A what? A retro handheld from China. How much is it? I already told you, $40. Oh, okay dear. Bring me my purse. And that is what we call the hustle. Hey there, how you doing? I'm TechDweeb, welcome. Thanks for clicking on the video today. I wasn't joking in the intro when I was saying that everything is expensive. That's a real problem right now, and I would never joke about such important topics that affect real people who are going through a rough time and struggling. Probably because they aren't very smart and they waste their money on scratch tickets and baby formula. But here's the thing, lots of people don't realize that they don't have to spend all their money on the things they want because very often you can get a cheaper version of the thing and it might be almost just as good. I mean, why eat tagliatelle al tartufo nero when some dollar store ramen with chopped up hot dogs tastes almost just as good, probably. But when it comes to retro handhelds, very often you get what you pay for. If you want a great doodad, you gotta pay great doodad money. And if you want a medium-ish doodad, you expect to pay medium-ish amounts of money. And if you get a super cheap doodad, very often it feels like a super cheap doodad, obviously. But there are ways you can enjoy your retro games on handhelds that give you a great experience and still come in at a budget price, if you know where to look and who to listen to. Hint, hint. Which brings us to this, the R36H. This is like a horizontal successor to the R36S, which is another budget handheld that I reviewed on my channel before. I don't know why I pulled the trigger on this one though. I wasn't excited about it or anything. Probably just because it was orange, to be honest. And I was not expecting to be impressed, but I was wrong. Wrong as a $3 toonie. This is not only a super cheap budget price, not only is it better than the R36S, not only is it orange, it's actually so good that it can stand toe-to-toe with some of the big name devices. This is basically a cheap version of the Amberlic RG35XX-H, which is more than twice the price of this thing. This is less than $40. I paid $34. I bought this with my own money. Well, my mom's money, more accurately. We bought it together. I do lots around the house. Don't judge me. For $40-ish, you get a lovely little doodad with good build quality, good controls, great screen, an amazing operating system, and the power to play all the old retro systems up to PS1 and lots of Nintendo 64 and Dreamcast and PSP. And it comes preloaded with games all set up and ready to rock. I mean, there is a little bit of jank to deal with, and we'll talk about that, but honestly, not much. And if you've been looking for something cheap as a first handheld or something just to tinker with or give as a gift, this is definitely worth considering. It punches way above its weight, unlike me, with very few downsides, unlike me. And we'll talk about all that stuff today. I mean, except my downsides. You need to date me to find out those, and the reality will come crashing down on you real fast. Let's get the specs out of the way. This thing is rocking a rock chip, the good old RK3326, which is a very common chip that's used in a ton of these doodads. We get 1 GB of DDR3 RAM, a 3.5-inch 640 by 480 IPS OCA laminated screen. Mine came with a 64 GB SD card, no Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth, no video out, and a 3000 mAh battery. For the controls, we have a whole bunch of them actually. There's a left stick in the upper configuration, D-pad in the lower configuration, screen in the middle, face buttons over here, and another stick down here, and start and select up there. On the top we have bumpers and triggers and a power button, a reset button, no HDMI hole. In the pictures they show an HDMI hole here, but that's a lie. There's not one there. And volume buttons. Underneath, we have dual downward firing stereo speakers, and a USB-C hole for charging, and an SD card hole for game storage, and a headphone hole, and another SD card hole for the system card, and another USB-C hole for OTG connection. Around back, we get a door that you can open up to remove the battery, and some grippy pads for stability and comfort. Very often when I get cheap devices, I can immediately tell they're cheap devices because they feel like cheap devices. Everything from the controls to the buttons and the ergonomics, and especially the plastic. Yeah, you get it in your hands and you're like, ew. This thing does not feel like a cheap device though. I mean, it's not like premium or anything, but it feels more like a mid-range device, like a Amberlic XX device, rather than a low-end device like we usually get for $35 or whatever. There are a few rough edges, literally. There's a few weird seams that you can feel in your hands. Also, like how the SD cards don't slot perfectly flush with the edge of the case. And a few little janky things like that, but these are very minor complaints compared to what it gets right. They basically stole the exact shape and style of the Amberlic R36H, the Zazbizzle as I call it, except they put the stick up top. So if you hate bottom D-pads, then you should get something else instead of this. And if you hate orange, then don't get the orange one. I like orange, so I got the orange one. Wow, that must have been so helpful for you to hear that. Actually, speaking of the orange, yeah, it's orange. And you guys know how much I love me an orange thing. That's why I love pumpkins and oranges and Donald Trump. This orange is pretty nice actually. It has a neat kind of look to it. But if you want something more muted, the white or black versions are more subtle. These grippy pads on the back are nice. Amberlic did that on the Zazbizzle and it felt great there. The R36 stole that idea, and it's just as good here. Overall, it's a nice sized doodad. It's not huge, but not tiny, comfy to hold. And because the sticks are quite recessed and there's no bumper hump protrusions, it should be quite pocket friendly. I mean, I'm not going to do a pocket test, even though I'm standing right here and I easily could. All I'd have to do is put it in my pocket to show you, but I'm not going to do that because I don't want to run out of time in this review, and we have lots of other things that we need to talk about. So let's just say that if I was going to guess if it could work well in a pocket, I would say that yes, it probably does. And maybe we'll look at that in another video when we have more time. This doesn't feel as good as the Zazbizzle. That's just a little better in almost every way. However, it's very close, and if you consider the price, if you've been looking for a horizontal 3.5-inch screen doodad like the Zazbizzle and you wanted to save some money, this is definitely worth considering. You know what else is worth considering? Subscribing to TechDweeb. Let's take a moment and consider doing that right now. Yeah. You know what? Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that. The kiss of death for any handheld is the controls. Terrible controls are one thing you can't get past. And on the R36H, not only are the controls not terrible, they're actually good. I guess if I was being picky, I'd say that the bumpers and triggers are a little on the clicky side, but still less clicky even than the Zazbizzle. The D-pad is a little on the stiff side, but again, a bit less stiff than the Zazbizzle. The D-pad inputs are really good. No false diagonals, but it's easy to hit the diagonals when you want to. Good for fighting games. The buttons feel awesome. Nice size and layout, and they have a good feel to them. The sticks do have some slight cardinal direction snapping, but again, it's pretty much the same as most retro doodads like the Zazbizzle, and they work well enough. So overall, yeah, great controls. Which is good because you need those to play retro games, obviously. The screen that we get on here is the exact same screen that we get on all these retro doodads, which is to say that it's really good. It's 3.5 inches, which is big enough for a pocket-friendly doodad, bright and clear with great viewing angles, 640 by 480 resolution, so you get pixel-perfect integer scaling options for most 4x3 stuff. And for the oddball resolution stuff like Nintendo and Super Nintendo, you can use a shader to get a nearly integer scaling effect. Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, and PSP are not 4x3 systems, so you'll get black bars on the screen for those, but they're still totally playable. The sound, however, is not the best. I mean, it's fine. You can hear it and the games sound okay. It's loud enough. It's just a little bit tinny and not very bassy. It's not terrible. I don't hate the sound at all in general. It's just not gonna wow you probably. It didn't wow me. I don't think I said wow even once. One of the best parts about retro handhelds is that you can often customize them once you get them. Tweak them to make them perfect. Cheap handhelds usually have problems with this aspect, but not the R36H. We get ArcOS here, out of the box, which is an awesome operating system that is compatible with a ton of devices. So it's very mature with lots of support for extra stuff. It's emulation station based, so the front end looks amazing with all the options you could ever want. You can tweak the front end with themes. It comes with a heck ton of themes, and I even added the TechDweeb theme, and that works awesome. Really completes the orange vibe of this thing. You get access to RetroArch for most systems, and you can customize that as well. And I got the 64GB version, and it came preloaded with games, and the game lists are actually really good. Nice, clean game lists with proper names and scraped box art. And complete too, they have all the games from the older retro systems and a ton of higher end 3D stuff too. This I was not expecting, to have such a good system and game collection on the base 64GB model of a super cheap handheld. That's a nice change from the usual jank that we get on these cheapo doodads. However, because I'm TechDweeb, I noticed that the ArcOS version that they had on here was older, so I flashed a fresh SD card with a more up-to-date version. And I added a second SD card filled with all my own ROM sets, which I just copied over from my newly build, including all my scraped arts and favorites lists. I used a 256GB SD card and I loaded it with a ton of stuff. And it's been really nice to have a freaking archive of games on this thing. You can really deck it out. And when it comes to gaming, this is a bog standard RK3326 level of performance. There's not going to be any surprises here. You'll get everything up to and including PS1, and you can run every game no problem, and they're all set up to run properly out of the box, so you won't need to tweak stuff unless you want to. Nintendo DS runs well, but like most of these retro handhelds, you'll be using the thumbstick for touchscreen stuff, which actually does work totally fine in most games. The high-end systems like Nintendo 64 and Dreamcast and PSP won't have perfect performance for the hardest to run games, but most stuff does run fine, and you get a lot on here, so there's lots to try out and experiment with. And you can tinker with it with the settings and kind of squeeze out more performance for lots of things. I know the RK3326 chip has been done to death, but here it's almost impressive what it can do when you consider the price of this thing. But you guys know I prefer to stick to really retro stuff on devices like this. Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, TurboGrafx-16, Sega Master System, Sega Genesis, Arcade, and Neo Geo. All the older retro stuff is my favorite stuff to play on these things. And all that stuff plays so well. Performance is perfect, everything just works out of the box, all the settings you could ever want to tweak. The system is great for managing your save games, the controls are great for playing them, and they look great on this screen. Yet, yeah, it doesn't do anything that most other retro doodads can do, but what it does really, really well. And that's not very common for devices at this price. When I review a retro doodad, I like to live with it for a while. I'll carry it around for a few days and use it as much as I can and try it around the house, in bed, in the tub, not on the toilet. I need to concentrate there. But pretty much I just like to experience what it's like owning the thing and try to think like, if someone bought this, would they be happy with it? I mean, I did buy this myself, but that's what I try to do, even if a device is sent to me. I like to try to think, like if someone buys this, what are they going to experience? And not focus too much on if this other thing is technically better or if this is technically cheaper or whatever, because maybe at this price, the good and the bad things might balance out and make a less than perfect device be the perfect choice for someone. So in that regard, the R36H is an amazing handheld. I mean, it's not as good as the Amberlic Zazbizzle or the Powkiddy RGB 10 Max 3, but it's dang close, and it gets all the important stuff right. This would be a great handheld for someone who wants to experiment with retro handhelds and wants to get something good that is full-featured and will let them learn about handhelds and tinker with a good system. And even for me, a retro doodad enthusiast, I like this thing. I'm glad I bought it because I'm genuinely having fun with it. I enjoy having it in my hands and it's fun to game on and the games look and play great. And now that I have it set up, I'm probably going to be grabbing it to game on. So I have no problem saying that, yeah, if you want to spend more, then consider getting something more expensive like a Zazbizzle or even a Retroid or whatever. But if you can't or you don't want to spend more than $40-ish, then you probably won't find a better device than this thing at that price. And it's orange. Have I mentioned it's orange? Isn't it beautiful? And if you want to pick one of these bad boys up, there's a link in the description below. And that brings us to the end. I hope you found this helpful and titillating. Click the thumbs up button if you're titillated, or don't if you're not. And that's it for me. I'm TechDweeb. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.